Christoph, you are an assistant professor in the Department of Industrial Design at this university, the Eindhoven University of Technology. And the topic of your research is broad outline, let's say it, human-technology interaction. But I've noticed that quite a lot of your publications are published open access, and I suppose you are doing that knowingly. So my first question is, why do you publish open access? Do you have specific reasons for that?
Well, first of all, there's no reason not to.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think it is important that all people on this planet have access to the knowledge the scientists create. And most of all, I think it is also quite fair, since I'm actually paid by the government, meaning also the taxpayers.
Yeah.
That I think it's also important that the taxpayers are not charged double, in the sense that first they have to pay my salary and next they have to pay for my output. I think that is quite unfair.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I'm very much for the idea of open access.
Okay, I understand, yeah. My next question is it hard for someone with your professional background in industrial design, is it hard to publish open access? Are there sufficient appropriate open access journals for you?
Well, publishing open access is actually quite easy, because not necessarily about, whether, it's not the question whether it's a whole journal that completely dedicates itself to open access or not, because even the commercial publishers these days allow you to make things open access, like with Springer, the Dutch universities do have a contract, which is very nice. But also, besides what this is called, of course, the golden way of open access, but also the green way of open access, namely that you actually make your articles available within the repositories of the universities, or even on your own homepage, is actually granted by now by most publishers, even most of the Elsevier journals. So making it available is actually rather easy, and it's not dependent on one specific journal.
You already mentioned Springer, the open choice program. So, because I've noted that also you are using that program to publish in open access.
Very much so, because again, there was an arrangement or a contract down with the Dutch universities and Springer, and I hope it is slightly better than the $2,000 that Springer is usually asking for, which is of course quite outrageously expensive, so I hope that we made a better deal. In any case, see, the problem that we're facing these days is that the market for publishing, or the way things are published, is changing dramatically. And the change was introduced with the arrival of the internet. Now, back in some 20 years ago, the publisher did a very valuable job for us, and they made scientific knowledge available, and they're essentially responsible for duplication and distribution of scientific knowledge. Now, these two value creations are pretty much gone, because anybody can distribute and duplicate digital content these days. So in that sense, one of the greatest value creation that the traditional publishers had has vanished. And now essentially we're in a process of change, similar to what the music industry has gone already, a shrinking process for the publishers, but nevertheless a healthy process, because it doesn't really make sense to hold up a system. I'm not sure, I haven't been to a library in which I would pick up a journal from the shelf and read it in ages. I don't do that. I think nobody does these days anymore. You on your desktop computer, you get electronic access, and that is all you really need. And in that sense, the idea of printing a journal is really old-fashioned, and in the long run it will disappear. And therefore also the production costs of journals will decrease dramatically, and have to decrease dramatically, and therefore also the prices of open access publishing. Now, of course, publishing will always cost something. It's unavoidable. There will always be some costs involved.
Publishing is expensive.
Somebody has to lay it out, somebody has to make it, archive it. There are some services that the commercial publishers are still able to offer to us. But nevertheless, the current situation in which we are writing the papers, we are reviewing the papers, we are organizing the journals, we are doing all the work. We spend so many hours in that, only for the commercial publishers to take away our copyright and then sending it right back to us. This is ridiculous.
Have you tried to found, for example, an open access journal together with your colleagues?
We tried, and I have to admit that I underestimated the conservatism of some academics.
Okay.
The question, we are of course also responsible for this. And we are the producers and the consumers of this good. So we are in principle in a very powerful position. But unfortunately, a lot of senior people misunderstand open access publishing with no peer review, and it of course should not be mixed up. But there's a lot of misunderstanding and ignorance out there, and therefore it's quite difficult. But nevertheless, I mean, these days there is the open journal system, which allows everybody to start a new journal. So you take a computer, you take the open journal system. So the infrastructure to set up is quite easy. And what remains the difficult part and the most expensive part is the peer review process and the management of it. But this is something that we do already anyway, for free.
I agree. Okay, Christoph, many thanks for your contribution.
You're welcome.